Hey folks, Matthew Weiss here, weiss-sound.com and weissadvice.com. Weiss Advice, of course, where you can go to get full-length tutorials, webinars, downloads, contests, all sorts of wonderful things. And recently on weissadvice.com, I put up a full-length course called the Autotune tutorial, which is a full-length course on using pitch correction. Everything you need to know from naturalistic pitch correction to more effective pitch correction, as well as a couple things that you probably didn't know you could do with pitch correction, which in my opinion are total game changers, but what do I know? All right, so this video, probably what we've all been waiting for a while now, Autotune versus Metatune. I've had Autotune for a while. I'm pretty darn familiar with the software. I have a platinum plaque for using it, basically. Metatune I've had since it was in beta. I've got an endorsement deal with Slate, so I've been using it before it was even out. I waited a little while to make this video because getting a proper comparison was going to take time. They're not really the same. Even though on the surface they look like they're the same, they kind of work in the same sphere, there's a lot of very specific differences that make them not exactly easy to compare. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a little bit of this track, and then I'm going to explain some of the things that go into the differences and why it's a little tricky to make the comparison at first. All right, here we go.
It's easy. If you can dream, you can fly. Spread your wings, touch the sky. Yeah, high, yeah, fly, yeah, high, yeah, fly. If pain is life, life is love, till we reach the heavens above. Yeah, high, yeah, fly, yeah, high, yeah, fly.
Okay, so what are we listening to? This here is a pre-mix session. This is the kind of stuff that I do to sort of prepare everything for the mix down. Basically, it's a chance for me to go over all of the vocal recordings and get them to a place where maybe I would have already gotten them to had I been the recordist on the project. So some basic compression, basic EQ, as well as a chance to go over some editing, which will include some time shifting as well as some pitch correction. And so I felt this would be a really good session to take a look at Autotune versus Metatune. Now, one of the things that's really important to stress is that a lot of the times my clients are actually recording through Autotune. And when you record through anything, you're going to naturally start to adapt to the nature of whatever you're recording through. So if you're recording through compression, you're going to perform in a way that adapts to the sound of that compression. Same thing with EQ, same thing with delay, same thing with reverb, and certainly the same thing with pitch correction. So it is very, very difficult to compare something that was recorded through one pitch corrector by then removing that pitch corrector and putting a different one on. This is even true from different instances of Autotune. I've found that they do not necessarily translate one-to-one going from like Autotune Pro, a recent Autotune Pro, to like an old school EFX. They don't sound the same. The pitch correction has changed, as it should. So one thing to keep in mind is if you record through something, you're kind of committing to it. Now, the other thing that makes this a little bit hard is that pitch correctors in general have workflow differences, and workflow differences are not readily comparable. If you're talking about, say, like just needing to grab a quick fix on one word, I actually prefer Wavestune because Wavestune is the simplest user interface. It's very easy to do destructively, and personally, I think that the sound of it is underrated. I actually think it's very good sounding in general. So if there's like one word that just needs to be moved into place, Wavestune is my usual go-to. However, if I want to get more surgical with things and I need to really deep dive, Melodyne is generally my preference because the user interface is so friendly. I can really see everything that I'm doing. There's so much versatility, and if something's printed in a way where there's actual stacks of vocals or stacks of an instrument where there's a chord, it's the only one that allows me to go in there and actually change an independent note inside of a printed chord stack. So just that ability alone makes Melodyne a great pick. Now, in terms of the actual sonic quality, if I've got the time and things aren't too off, I actually think that Autotune in graphical mode sounds a little bit better than Melodyne. And I know some people might get on me for that. It's not the most popular opinion, but I actually think that if you know how to use it, you can get a better sound out of Autotune over Melodyne, but it's going to take you a little bit longer because the user interface is really not as friendly. Here, there's a quintessential workflow difference that makes Metatune the one that showed up. Every M right over here is an instance of Metatune, whereas every A over here is an instance of Autotune. And if we just scroll down what I'm doing, I'm using Metatune a little bit more, but it's for a workflow difference. One of the things that's really cool about Metatune here is that it allows me to group different instances. So if I'm working on, say, these background vocal stacks here, I can group them all into a single group, and I can control them all from one instance of Metatune. So I can tweak 4 of them at once, which is a really, really nice thing for being able to go through all of this very fast. So for background vocals, it seemed Metatune would just work pretty well. Now, if you don't happen to have Metatune, it's not a lot harder to use Autotune. You get one right, and then you copy the instances of it. The only thing is if you want to tweak it a little bit later on, you kind of have to go through each individual one and tweak them. But for the most part here, Metatune is working. And that's because when we get into the sonic differences between Metatune and Autotune, which I think is probably what most of us are really here for, they're very, very similar. There's some very minor differences, and I'm going to try and point them out, but some of them you might not even necessarily hear it so easily because they're extremely minute. So I'm going to play this again, and then I'm going to kind of do some comparison here.
If you can dream, you can fly, spread your wings, touch the sky. Yeah, high, yeah, fly, get high with mine, get fly.
All right, so first of all, let's take off all of the tuning in general. Let's hear what we started with.
If you can dream, you can fly, spread your wings, touch the sky. Yeah.
All right, now I'm going to throw on Metatune.
If you can dream, you can fly, spread your wings, touch the sky. Yeah.
Did you notice how the vocal almost seemed to lift out of the speaker a little bit? It kind of brightened up a hair. Keep that in mind. I'm going to now take off Metatune. I'm going to put on Autotune.
If you can dream, you can fly, spread your wings, touch the sky. Yeah.
I'm going to compare them again just so you can hear it, but you might notice that there's a little bit more boldness in the low mids, and it's a slightly rounder sound, so to speak. So let's do this comparison again real quick.
If you can dream, you can fly, spread your wings, touch the sky. If you can dream, you can fly, spread your wings, touch the sky.
So there's a slight tone difference between Metatune and Autotune. Autotune, I believe, retains a little bit more of the low mids and doesn't really change much of anything else. It's pretty flat, pretty transparent. Metatune, we get a little bit of attenuation in the low mids and a little bit of lift in the upper mids, so it kind of makes things feel like they step forward a little bit. It's a little bit more of a printed sound. But that said, you know, they are pretty darn close, and it feels like splitting hairs because I don't feel like it's anything that a touch of EQ wouldn't change one way or another. Like if I'm using Autotune, I might need to add a little bit more treble or something to get it to be as excited, whereas if I'm using Metatune, I might need to build in a little bit more low mid to make it feel like the body's still there the same way. But we're talking like half dB kind of differences, so it's very subtle. I'd say a more pronounced difference is actually the grab of the tuning mechanism. So you know how like in a compressor you have your attack and release time, but you also have your knee control? The pitch correctors are kind of the same way. The onset of the pitch correction can have kind of more of a soft knee action or more of a hard knee action. And I would say that Autotune sounds to me like it's a little bit more gradual in its approach. It's a little bit more soft knee, whereas Metatune is a little grabbier. It's going to be a little bit more hard knee in its action. So I'm going to play these again, and then I'm going to show you the settings, and you'll get an idea of what I mean.
If you can dream, you can fly, spread your wings, touch the sky. Yeah. If you can dream, you can fly, spread your wings, touch the sky. Yeah.
So you can hear that pitch-wise, they're pretty darn similar in terms of like how locked in they are. They don't have a lot of bowing in the vocal. I'm not trying to get a lot of bowing in the vocal because this singer is not really a singer, he's a rapper, and too much bowing in the vocal is going to make it really like rub in a not so good way against the background vocals. So I don't want it to sound totally robotic, but I'm definitely favoring a more locked in place tone. But now if I pop open the settings here, on Autotune I have a retune speed of 25, and then the humanize is at 50. And then if I pop open Metatune here, you can see that I actually have the speed at about 33, and I don't have any of the humanize, but I have the note stabilizer on. And I found that these gave me very similar results in terms of the overall pitch correction feeling. So you can't really match them up one-to-one, in my opinion, because they don't really grab the same way. And that's one of the things that can make comparison a little bit challenging here. But overall, I feel like the action is very similar between the two. When I picked the sound of it in the record here, I ended up going with Metatune more for that tone lift in the leads, but then on the first layer of background vocals, I ended up going with Autotune, also because of that bowing, or that low-mid thing, and because the vocalist in the background vocals is a little bit more trained, and so a little bit more natural bowing, I think, was okay.
If you can dream, you can fly. Spread your wings, touch the sky.
I'm gonna shift these over to Metatune right here. So now the primary background vocal layer as well as the leads are both going to be Metatune, and you're going to hear that both now come together in a way that very much jumps out of the speaker.
If you can dream, you can fly. Spread your wings, touch the sky. Yeah.
And so they kind of almost float out of the speaker a little bit. Whereas if I go back to the Autotune on this, what we're going to hear is less of that jumping out of the speaker, but more of a blended sound.
If you can dream, you can fly. Spread your wings, touch the sky. Yeah.
I guess technically it's more of a separated sound, but by blended I mean they kind of fit together a little better because you've got one that's retaining a little more low mid and one that's kind of emphasizing some upper mid. So I felt that they layered really nicely. But that said, I could work with it either way for sure. Now, going down the line a bit, one of the things that I really like about Metatune, if we listen to this backup stack here, I almost thought of this as like an instrument, and so I got to take advantage of the hyper fast negative retune speed, and you'll hear that on the very last word. So when we get to the word fly, I get that really stair-steppy kind of pitch correction because I jump into that negative look ahead kind of retune thing, which is a unique capability inside of Metatune. So there's also certain unique things that you can do with Metatune. Similarly, you can do formant shifting with Autotune. You cannot do that with Metatune. And so when we got over to these stacks here, these lower stacks,
Get high, get fly.
that sound is using Autotune as a formant shifter and then Metatune on top of it to give it a synthy quality. So I'm using Metatune and Autotune on that for the different capabilities, the negative retune speed of Metatune and the formant shifting of Autotune. So in short, what do I say about it? They're different. I think that if you have access to one already, you probably don't need the other. I'm very happy to have both. It's really just going to come down to the individual vocal, the individual style of what the song is demanding. And I almost hate to give those answers because they feel like cop-outs, but that's kind of the reality of the situation, is that just different things ideally work in different ways. But I'm pretty happy to have both. So anyway, if you dig what I'm doing here on this channel, hit that like button. If you want to catch more of these videos, hit that subscribe with the bell so you get notified. If you have any questions about what you've seen or any other topics you want to see discussed, or if you just want to say hi, jump into the comments section below. Let me know you've been here. And of course, we are musicians, sound is our instrument, and I will catch you next time.